My name is Jill Konrath. I am a sales person who has been in sales my entire career. About 10 years ago, I started sharing what I know, and I write books now about sales. I've written 3 books, Selling Big Companies, Snap Selling, Agile Selling. I'm working on my 4th one right now. I am an addict when it comes to sales. I am obsessed with it, and most particularly I'm obsessed with sales productivity. My next book will be focused on the human side of sales productivity. But today we're looking at the other side in terms of what is the technology that's available to people today, because that is here, it's right now, and there's really so much that can be done with the technology. So just a quick thing about our panel. They're each going to introduce themselves momentarily. You will see that they're from a variety of companies, some big, some small. You know, so we're trying to represent all of you and have some things here that'll be helpful. They're going to share a little bit about their suite of apps that they're using, what they like, what are the favorite ones, what are having the most impact, where the biggest productivity is coming from. And then we're also going to open it up for questions from you and being very open and honest about what they've learned in this app journey of theirs and anything that they can do to help you be more successful and utilize more of the apps better. So that's enough about me, and what we're going to do now is we're going to move it on to Michelle. You're first. Okay, why don't you just give a quick overview of who you are so we have a little grounding.
Hi everyone, my name is Michelle Mantell. I'm president at George Street Photo and Video. We are a nationwide wedding photography and videography company. We started out in 2004 doing everything under the sun. In 2007 decided to focus in on weddings and did about 300 weddings that year. And since then we've grown to doing over 9,000 weddings. So we've got a lot of experience under our belts.
Richard.
Yes, so I'm Richard Ortega. I'm the Global Director of Inside Sales at Shutterstock. Shutterstock is a global technology company. We've created the largest, most vibrant, two-sided marketplace for folks that want to license content. And so this is content like photography, like footage, and music. And we've now started to get into sort of innovative tools that help in the creative process.
Cool. Amy?
Hi, I'm Amy Roy. I'm the Vice President of Sales Operations for Ceridian. Ceridian is a human capital management organization. We focus on technology that makes work-life better, so tools for HR, payroll, workforce management. We've started in 1932 as actually as part of IBM, and then spun off over the number of years. And so we're really proud of our history, but we're really excited about our technology as we now offer everything in the cloud as well.
Cool. And Russ.
Hey everyone, Russ Hurl. I'm the Vice President of Inside Sales for Double Dutch. Just by a show of hands, how many of you guys have participated in Party Force this week? All right, that's our app. So you're welcome. What's really interesting about what we do is if you go to the Cloud Expo, you can actually put your name in for basically a free Tesla. Have you noticed that from Aptus? So our app basically is being used to drive leads to exhibitors. And so we have 3,000 customers and just a sales machine. So
yes, he does have a sales machine. I know that. Right. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to have each of these people share a little bit about their app history and what they're doing, the whole suite of apps, and what they're choosing to do and why. I think our first slide that comes up is George Street again. Michelle, back to you. Yeah.
All right, so when we first started looking into gaining an ACRM system, we were actually using an electronic signature system ahead of time, and that had revolutionized things for us because we were a small business with only 10 employees at the time. So we actually had an app before we had Salesforce. So when we started to implement Salesforce, immediately we knew that we had to apply this app in, and that kind of whet our appetite for the AppExchange, and we started looking around, and we were looking for any kind of apps that were going to assist our sales team expansion. We knew that we wanted to go from our Chicago market only to open in around 15 new markets each year. And so we knew that was going to be a lot of sales consultant hiring and training, and we needed to find apps that were going to help us make them as efficient and make the process for them as easy to understand as possible. So that's really what we started looking at and was most important to us, was to increase that efficiency of the sales experience and to increase the consistency that we got from them as they were becoming new consultants with us.
Awesome. And now let's take a look at Shutterstock. What's your story?
For Shutterstock, we think about apps as it relates to how they can help us leverage so much data that we have. We are talking to something like 1 million customers a year, 1 million conversations a year. And this is 12 languages distributed across 4 offices around the world. There's a bit of complexity, lots of volume, high velocity business. So we need apps that do more than just one thing. We need apps that really help us to leverage the workforce that we have and the data that we have, and ultimately just accelerate through some of those challenges that come with volume and high velocity.
Awesome. Now we're going to take a look at Amy's. What's going on?
So how many of you were here at Dreamforce 2012? Anybody? Okay, we weren't, because we were in the middle of a 4-year Oracle implementation, and we didn't even know what Dreamforce meant as a functionality. So it's true. It's amazing how fast Salesforce has moved and how fast we've moved over the last 3 years. So we were in a situation where we had a business in the US, a business in Canada, and a business in the UK. We consolidated so that we actually started to act like one organization. And the project that was going to take us to do that was Oracle. And we were going to change all of our systems across all of the business over from starting with lead gen all the way through to customer billing, so the entire suite. We made a decision, I would say a very brave decision on the part of our CTO to end that project. And we were in a place where we actually were in a lot of trouble. We were 4 years in with systems that were probably too old before we even started the process, and now they were 4 years older. Some of them were actually, our pricing tool was actually in a sunset mode, where it wasn't just going to sunset and we wouldn't have support. It was actually had a date where it would just stop working, period. And the people who were responsible for that system actually left. So we were really acting very quickly. We went through a very aggressive timing from a vendor perspective, chose Salesforce. And with that process then went from 3 separate systems, combined US and Canada to go live at the same time about 2 years ago, brought the UK on this year. And so through our journey, it's really been around where can we get pieces to supplement the big picture to be able to make sure that we are able to both utilize the software effectively, but also grow that sales productivity, but also grow that global sales culture and not just have these individual silos, but really build it out so that we act as one organization.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so what we wanted to do at Double Dutch is create a sales assembly line. We basically looked at Toyota, Honda, looked at those types of manufacturing companies and said, how do we instrument a sales process and way of doing things where we actually will look at waste and identify where there might be waste within a sales machine. And so when we talk about our app story, when I talk about it, it's really how can we leverage apps to maximize the throughput. Anyone that knows anything about me, I'm a huge believer in theory of constraints, huge believer in that type of process thinking. But at the same time, I'm in at 5:30 in the morning making cold calls alongside my 120 reps. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to put in place a series of apps that could maximize the productivity at the rep level. Certainly we wanted visibility. I mean, you look at some of the apps that we have in here, Power Dialer, of course, from InsideSales.com is all about helping the reps maximize their productivity. Lean data, minimizing duplicates, and so on and so forth. We'll talk on a few of these here today. But I think the story that I would like to tell you all today is that when I started at Double Dutch, there was 15 people at the company. We had just raised some money, $4.5 million from Floodgate. And my charter was to basically bring in a sales machine. And in order to make that happen, it takes lead by example, but it also takes installing applications that you don't need to go out to a partner to pay $100,000 to implement. So literally, I implemented every single tool that you see here. As a VP of sales, I did it without spending a single dollar on outside consultants. And I'm no technical genius. right? I'm a cold caller, right? And so I can do all of this, and that's our story.
Okay, let's continue on this because we're going to talk about efficiency and rest. I'm going to keep going with you right now because
Sure.
you're kind of on a roll with this efficiency thing, and
Sure,
you're the
why not?
constraint theorist, you know, and the practitioner.
Yeah.
So let's go back, if we can go back to his apps for a second and say, of those apps he's got up here, tell us what really helped you with efficiency.
Efficiency.
Efficiency. Yeah. How do you create a more efficient team?
Yeah. Well, I think being able to measure the key success metrics, whether that's your conversation rate, that's your conversation to demo rate. If we're talking about our sales development team, if we're talking about our account executive teams, it's how do we measure the cycle time of the deals. So from an app perspective, from a sales development team point of view, it's really the power dialer. Because that has allowed us to make over 1.5 million cold calls in the last 3 years and book over 20,000 demos and generate just a ridiculous amount of pipeline. And as a result of that, become the fastest growing software company of the last 3 years, unless you count Zenefits, which may not be a software company, depending on how you look at it. And so when you talk about the account executives, one of the tools we can talk more about later that we just recently implemented was called Data Hug. Mm-hmm. And so keeping pipeline velocity at an acceptable level really requires some sort of transparency into what's going on in the sales process. And we have great adoption of Salesforce.com because it's really easy to use. However, there was a lot of action that was taking place outside of Salesforce, like meetings that were being scheduled, follow-up meetings that weren't being logged, those types of things, that made it very difficult for our sales leaders to get the visibility that they needed on the forecast. And it also made it difficult for our individual contributors to really understand if they're going to win that deal or not. So we can go into more depth on that.
Okay. Let's take a look at Amy. Oh, sorry. Passing the ball in the wrong way. Let's take a look at what you talk about from an efficiency standpoint. From a leadership technology, what are you using for efficiency?
Sure. Well, I think for us, one of the key pieces where we were struggling or where we sort of had a gap was around how we were going to create quotes and contracts for a new product line. So even though all this other stuff was going on around changing our whole ERP system, at the same time we had purchased a company and we're taking an entirely new approach to the products and services that we offered and really went from a service bureau to a technology company. And with that, we needed a tool that would have the flexibility that as we were really trying to figure out what our pricing strategy was, as well as build out the product, which was going to require then more lines in terms of what you're putting in your pricing quotes, we chose to go with Apttus, CPQ, and the contract management. So we have both of those tools in place today. And what that's really done for us is give us visibility as well as efficiency. So efficiency in terms of just the process of getting a quote and a contract. We had a lot of disparate systems going on, some stuff in Excel, some stuff in an older pricing tool, some stuff in a whole bunch of stuff. So this put everything in one spot for us and allowed us to see it right in Salesforce because it's built right on the Force platform. So just one place to go, one place to hit things. And because we put in both the CPQ and in the contracting place, then it's one tool to do all of that. As that product line then started to develop, what do you need when you want to go sell it? You need references. So as part of this, we also implemented Advocate Hub by Influitive. And what that allowed us to do then is to automate our reference request process as well as build out a customer advocacy program. So it allows customer facing to go in and say, I want to be an advocate for you. I'm willing to do a press release. I'm willing to go to a trade show and speak on your behalf. But what it did for our salespeople is they push one button on the opportunity and say, I want to request a reference. A small form pops up with all the data about the opportunity and the account that we already have. They fill out that form. It routes it then to our customer success team for them to go ahead then and fulfill that reference request. And that's really put some efficiencies around how do I get the reference in the first place, but also just the ability to track it and yet also engage our customer community.
Awesome. Let's go right to Richard.
Sure. So, when we think about efficiencies, I come back to this notion of 1 million conversations in a year. It's a lot of conversations, right? And this is across multiple languages and multiple time zones. And so, what we had was a manual process. We had all these calls coming into queues, and it was just whoever could grab what at whatever time. And so you had some folks cherry picking because they didn't really prefer to do service. You had other folks who were fighting over the sales leads that they thought were sales leads. And so ultimately the customer was the one that suffered. So we took on Distribution Engine, and thankfully so. What it's done for us is it's given us the ability to put in place complicated rules based on geography and language and customer, and direct those calls and those leads and cases to the right reps. And so ultimately it means that we've been able to reduce response times. We've been able to really do that consistently, right? So we had constant lags whenever we would have a spike. That's over. So we're constantly meeting our SLAs on response times. And then the other thing is that we have equitable distribution of leads. So I no longer hear from my reps, hey, I'm not talking to enough customers. I'm not getting enough opportunities. And so, given a hungry team, it means that they're able to really sort of satiate that appetite. The other thing is really, it's a good segue, which is our Thunderhead quoting system. So if you want to get a bunch of leads, the next step in that process is to send those leads quotes. And what we had before was a manual process. And so every rep would create a quote and then translate it themselves into whatever non-English language they were working on. And the graphics were inconsistent, the data was inconsistent. It was a mess, never mind the redundancies, right? Never mind the time wasted in just recreating your work over and over again. So Thunderhead gave us this ability to have sort of on-the-fly, auto-translate, conditional quote creation. And so not only do we have compliance against product and price, but we have less redundancy, considerably less redundancy when it comes to quote creation. And ultimately, it means we're able to create more and more quotes from all those million conversations.
Awesome. Thank you. And finally, back to Michelle. What are you doing?
All right. So every single app that we have is meant to increase our efficiency. Being a smaller business, we need to make sure that anything we implement is going to help us not have to increase that headcount. That's a major issue for us. So one of the ones that I want to talk about today that we've really used is GeoPoint. We are dealing with pretty much all millennials in the wedding market, and they are looking for the easiest way to do something. So what we developed was an online appointment scheduler. May not sound that revolutionary, it was for us, but we were able to develop a point where we could get our 150 consultants' schedules together, match it with what the client was looking for, and we did that all in the back end with GeoPoint. So that may not be a traditional application of the way that some people would use it, but it helped us to increase efficiency for our clients, which is exactly what they're looking for. The way that we use GeoPoint traditionally is we have our sales teams out there who are able to look up where the closest location is to a client with a click of a button, with a click of a map button. We really love that feature. And for our marketing team and for our leadership team, we're able to use their Visualize tool, which gives us heat maps of where clients are located, which is extremely helpful when we're trying to pick where we should do our next bridal show in a new market that we're opening.
Okay, now we're going to do some fast rounds here with some real quick questions. Salesforce motivation. We're just going to keep going with you. What kind of apps are you using to motivate your sales team? And boom, we're going to go on there, right down the line, okay?
So this is a non-traditional example again. We use email to case premium to basically allow our consultants to respond back to clients. Most of our clients are emailing. We're not talking to a lot of them on the phone. So email to case allows us to respond to the clients and then track how often and how quickly we are closing cases. We didn't have any of those metrics when we were just allowing our inside sales reps to reply from their inbox. Now that we're using this tool in conjunction with the Case Agent Business Hours app, which is a free app, both of those allow us to really get those hardcore metrics on how many cases we're handling in a day, how quickly we're closing those, and then we're able to motivate our team based on that. Give away prizes for who's able to get the most closed in a day, and kind of keep the team engaged when we see we've got a high caseload, and how quickly can we really get this, and what can we celebrate with, and how we have dashboards all over our office with that kind of information.
Awesome. Richard, what are you using at Shutterstock?
Hands down, level 11 is what drives motivation for us. We You have to realize that this global force that we have primarily started off as a service force. So they were doing translations and tech support. And we said, well, we have to take advantage of these folks that speak all these languages. And so what you have is a group of people who are not competitive, right? And the best way to make them competitive is not with tricks, but just show them the data, right? So all of a sudden, level 11 made it so that we could activate our data, right? We could gamify our KPIs, the ones that we knew drove serious performance, and we could be transparent real time, right? Historically, I would pull reports, Excel sheets, stack rank. By the time I was done, it was no longer real time. Somebody else had already gone to the top of that leaderboard. Cool. And so now we have transparency, real time, and we have it on display on screens all over our office. So everyone can see at any given moment, who's on top of the board.
Cool. And what are you doing at Ceridian?
So when we went to Salesforce, one of the big pieces that we decided to do was embrace chatter. And we used chatter very heavily throughout the organization to ask questions, keep track, but also recognize people. So the app that's really made a difference for us is Ring My Bell. It shows up in your sidebar, your side panel, and you can control when it goes off, but it's a bell, or a cash register, or applause, or a bullet ricochet, depending upon what sound that you like. So we have ours set at a threshold, and anytime there is a closed won deal, everybody hears it. And what
Everybody.
Everybody.
In the whole office.
Anybody, well, we're mostly virtual, but anyone who we have 800 users. Every one of those users has something pop up on their screen and make a noise. But what the real beauty then is when you click on it, it takes you right to the chatter feed of the opportunity, and you can say, great job, nice work, congratulations, and really build not only a culture of success, because success breeds success, but more so that you recognize success, right? And that's really made a difference for us.
Awesome. What's going on at Double Dutch from a motivational perspective?
I think for us, motivation is highly a function of whether or not you feel like you're successful in your role. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of what the panel has said, I think we do as well in terms of dashboarding and whatnot. But the way I think about motivation is how do I equip our account executives or sales development reps to reach their full potential? And certainly transparency with the data is a big part of that. And so knowing how to get from where you are now to a closed deal is probably one of the most motivational things for a rep. Is like if you don't know how to get to that stage, it's probably difficult for you to feel really motivated. So we use Data Hug, which gives them the transparency to know like where they're actually at in the sales process. Are they losing ground? Is the momentum falling off? And by scoring each of those opportunities and displaying it on a dashboard, we can drive breakthrough performance that way. And then from a recognition standpoint, we actually use an app called Tango Card, built right into Salesforce. It's an app from the AppExchange where you can actually give people gift cards, different little rewards and recognition for doing things. So we're always doing spiffs and contests. And if you go into our office, you'll see that it's really loud and noisy, people on the phone making cold calls, running demos, and there's a lot of excitement there. And certainly some of those techniques that you all mentioned we use as well.
Okay, now, any one of you can answer this, and all of you can answer this. If there's one app you can't live without, total torture, which is the one that you would die if you didn't have? Jump in. Anyone?
So I can answer that. I would actually come back to distribution engine. I'm thinking about 16 and beyond. We're going to be moving into specialization. We'll be scaling the force even further still. And I'm going to need to be able to, of course, not only score the customers, but then distribute them based on even more rules than I have today. And I know there's no way I need to get to 2 million conversations in a year, right? And I need to increase my conversion, and the various other points. And so I'm not going to be able to do that without automated distribution of those incoming contacts.
Okay, and the name of it was?
Distribution engine.
Distribution engine, okay. Anybody else?
I can go. For us, it would absolutely be DocuSign and DrawLoop, the combination of those two apps. It helps us generate our contracts and send it out to our clients, who I mentioned are millennials. And if I ask them to fax back a contract, I'm never getting it back. So we have no choice.
They wouldn't even know what the word fax meant, would they?
No, I'd probably get them to maybe email it back, maybe, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's two. One would be data.com clean. So as we have scaled out the sales organization, one of the problems we have is with territories, just the cleanliness of the data. I don't know about you all, but we build our territories around geographic boundaries as well as employee counts between mid-market and enterprise. And so having like a source of truth coming from Dun & Bradstreet, which is built into data.com, is absolutely critical to minimizing any conflicts or people yelling at each other in the office because they think that that lead is theirs or whatnot. And then the other would be the power dialer from inside sales, because we've closed thousands of deals and that they've pretty much all been from cold calls. So having a reliable system to be able to make outbound cold calls to book demos that just works is probably is key to our success. And I would argue it's probably not necessarily the app, but our ability to execute that is our competitive differentiation.
And I would say for us now that we've moved to a platform that automates our both our pricing quote perspective as well as the contract generation, and we have electronic signature through Adobe as part of the contract management tool, we couldn't get away from that. Like, we've now built that into what we expect. I think before we went live, we didn't have expectations on what we could really understand about our discounting, what we could really understand about contract clauses that come up most frequently to be changed. We just didn't have the data. Now that we have that information, I don't think we could go backwards, so we would need to continue something along those lines.
Okay. This is my last question, then it's your turn. Okay, pitfalls. What are the pitfalls of the whole app thing, and choices, onboarding people, anything related to apps? Pitfalls.
For sure, it's choosing any technology that doesn't benefit the user. I mean, I used to work at Salesforce, and years ago, the biggest issue was like just getting CRM adoption. That's not really an issue anymore, as much as it used to be. But in terms of choosing applications that you're going to roll out, if you do it just from a perspective of, look, I'm a VP, I want to understand what's going on in the organization, and you don't do it from the perspective of, is this going to make my rep more productive, it's going to give my reps more visibility into what they need to do to be successful, then it's probably not going to be successful.
Other thoughts in terms of pitfalls, things you've learned?
Install it in your sandbox first. That's a huge one. If you don't install it in your sandbox first, we just had our admin accidentally install a case reporting tool into our main org instead of the sandbox, and we couldn't report on cases for a couple hours until we figured out what was doing it. So be careful.
I would add to that, to what both of these guys have just said, which is it's the actual rollout, right? So, assuming it does something good for your users and assuming you've tested it, then you need to have the right story, and you need to be able to tell that story to your reps so that it's not just about adoption, it's about understanding, right? So they have the context and they understand really what's in it for them when they go to use that app.
I would say there's two things. One is I get really excited, so I'll go to the AppExchange and just look for stuff. And then I'll send my system administrator sitting here, and she's smiling, and I'll say, go put this in the sandbox and let's see what happens, right? And you can get very easily carried away, especially if you look at the free app. So it's great to put them in the sandbox because sometimes you get it and you're like, oh, that is not what I thought it was going to be. So I think just don't get too carried away, but certainly take advantage of it. And then the other piece I would just say is there's a lot of things that look the same. So they call themselves, CPQ, or they'll call themselves lead gen, and you really have to dig to understand what they're really going to do for your business, because they all probably do a lot of things the same, but there's going to be a couple of key things that are really going to make the difference, and you just have to prioritize what it is that you're trying to accomplish so that you make sure you get the one that's really going to get you where you need to be.
Great.